Hello, my soccer universe, for a little preview of the 2025 Europa League Final between Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United on 21st of May at the San Mamés in Bilbao. And before you say, why am I wearing a Spurs jersey? Am I for Spurs? We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I will also switch jerseys with this one halfway through the video. Spurs are the home team, so that's why I'm wearing Spurs first. Let me be absolutely honest. I love the Europa League. However, this Europa League final is for me honestly a worst case scenario. It's the least excited I've been for a Europa League final in quite a while. And it's not because we have two English teams playing each other. I actually don't mind that. But if those English teams were any good, those are two horrible teams. We have number 17 in the Premier League against number 16 in the Premier League as the final is kicked off, and that just doesn't feel right. And I hear already all the talk about how this reflects the weak field in the Europa League. I guess in a way it does, but as of late we didn't really get the two really bad Premier League teams were steamrolling through the competition. It may speak though to the fact that this year we are not getting teams from the Champions League into the Europa League. Maybe this made the field a little bit weaker, but I really gotta say this final does not excite me because of the two teams that are in there. And again, not because these are two teams that I don't like or whatsoever, but the way they have been performing. These teams are a joke. That one of them will play in the Champions League just does not feel right. And I have to say, for almost any other team that was in the quarterfinal, I would not have said that, except for these two. Before we talk a little bit more about the finalists, let's look a little bit also at the host city, which is of course Bilbao, the largest city in the Basque country of Spain. I mean, it is a well-known footballing city thanks to Athletic Club being world-renowned for their very exceptional status within the Spanish game. And I think they're number 3 overall in Spain when you consider league season. They, I think, have never been relegated, and that thanks to a Basque policy. Bilbao itself might not be the flashiest destination as a tourist. However, there are quite some things. Bilbao had made a remarkable turnaround from a rather industrial city in the 20th century to a city that is very much service related. It went from a steel town thanks to the Guggenheim Museum, and that is the main landmark in Bilbao. And yes, the San Mamés, I think, is the second one, I would argue. The city has turned itself upside down and is now a tourist destination, not of the type that, for instance, Madrid or Barcelona are, but they rank very, very high because this Guggenheim Museum is one of the craziest structures that you will ever see in the world. But the town itself is also a nice inner city. It lies on the Nervion River, so there's a nice scenery as well, and of course it is within a mountainous region. This is the green part of Spain. However, to me the most interesting part of Bilbao has always been the San Mamés, and this is not the old San Mamés, which was really an English-style stadium. The current one, I think, was opened in 2013, but only with 3 stands. It is a rather impressive structure. I really like the outside. It's very similar to the final venue of the Champions League in Munich, can be lit in all kind of different configurations. It's very striking. It also has some pretty big TV screens in there. And I've been told the Poza Street is probably one of the best run-ups in Spain towards the stadium because you can go downtown straight to the stadium. I also like how imposing it lies over the river when you look from the other side because it's on a high bank above the river. So rather impressive structure. Fun fact, initially the roof was a little bit thinner, but Bilbao fans said, you know, it rains a whole lot, we're getting wet. And so they extended the roof as well, and I think this can even be taken back. So a rather impressive stadium, a worthy stadium for a Europa League final. Unfortunately, the home team just about did not make it. Okay, let's see the pathway to the final between these two teams. Let's start with the designated home team in Spurs, who finished the league phase in 4th spot with 5 wins, 2 draws and 1 loss. The loss came away from home at Galatasaray at a time when we really thought that Galatasaray might actually do something in this competition. No one knew that they're gonna get ousted by AZ. That brings me another thing. Spurs also beat AZ 1-0 at home in the league phase, and they also faced the Dutch side in the round of 16, where they were lucky to get away with a 1-0 loss in Alkmaar. However, at home they easily turned it around with a 3-1. Then they were drawn with Eintracht Frankfurt. I mean, sort of drawn with Eintracht Frankfurt, where many said Eintracht having such a great season in the Bundesliga, they really could give Spurs some trouble. Quite the opposite. While Frankfurt took an early lead, I would argue that Spurs were much the better team and were unfortunate to not get the home win. However, they get an away win. Yes, it also helped that Mario Götze got injured very early on in that return leg, and then Frankfurt couldn't get it done. Spurs, not dogmatic as they are in the Premier League, they dug into that one and got the win. And then they faced a sensation of this tournament in Bodø Glimt, who almost made it into the top 8. They still, though, made it all the way to the semifinals, beating Lazio along the way. And I guess this was a step too far. They were completely outclassed with a kind of B score because many important players were missing. Spurs beat them 3-1 at home. And that was a score that flattered Bodø Glimt, honestly. And then away from home, yes, Glimt tried. But Spurs again held tight and ran away 2-0 winners to actually qualify quite easily for this final. Now, United's pathway to the final was a whole lot more exciting and featured some of the best games that we've seen in this Europa League season. Already on match day 2, they faced Porto away from home and played out a really crazy 3-3 draw where it felt kind of lucky they got out with a draw. However, they managed to get the draw, and there was always this fight back quality that especially Harry Maguire embodied in many ways. They started out the league phase with 3 draws in a row, 20 at home and then 2 away draws, but then in the end they won out and finished in a very credible 3rd place with 5 wins and 3 draws, just a point ahead of Spurs, so slightly better there. Then in the round of 16, it was really not much trouble against Real Sociedad, a Real Sociedad team that had been hitting a little bit the skids at that point already. A 1-1 draw away from home was then followed up with a very emphatic 4-1 at home. On to the quarterfinals where they faced Olympique Lyonnais, a very level draw, an absolute mad draw overall. Although I always had the feeling that in both games in regulation, United were the slightly better team. Still, was a 2-2 draw away from home and Onana really not showering himself in glory. And then at home, Lyon also managed to fight back and even better, had a 4-2 lead in overtime with just 10 minutes to go. However, this is the fight back quality that United have shown throughout this Europa League season, that they managed not only to equalize, but to snatch a super late winner to win 5-4. One of the best overtimes that I've ever seen, one of the craziest games that I've ever seen. And then they faced what many said, probably the best team in the competition, and the game in Bilbao against Athletic Club really at first showed that Bilbao are the better team, but there was a nervousness to them, and then within a few seconds it all fell apart for Bilbao. They concede a goal, they have a player sent off, penalty is given. Within 15 minutes, United win it 3-0, and Bilbao at that moment just wanted to get out. And while they then tried, United always had the better, and as soon as they equalized at home, they were gonna be the winners of that one, and they win it 4-1. So another impressive result, one of the very few impressive results that United had this season. So let's compare these two clubs that have been playing each other for a very, very long time, going back to the beginning of the last century. I mean, overall, United are of course the bigger club. They have 20 English championships as compared to Spurs 2s, which were all in the 60s. They won the FA Cup 13 times, however, Spurs 8 times is also not that bad. However, crucially, United have won the Champions League 3 times, have been, I think, in a couple of more finals as well, whereas their Spurs only have a single finals appearance. Interesting enough, though, the Europa League / UEFA Cup was won more often by Spurs than by United. Spurs actually won it in the 80s, I think, twice, whereas United's win is more recent in a final in Stockholm against the Ajax Amsterdam. None, of course, have won the Conference League. They've never played in the competition, but they both won also the Cup Winners' Cup. So they're level. In the head-to-head, similar to when we look at the championships, of course, United are dominant in their meetings. They have 96 wins as compared to 57 by Spurs, 51 draws overall. However, Spurs have won all 3 games this season against United. Can they make it 4? That is the big question. Market value also points that Spurs are the slightly better side. Age, very comparable. Spurs slightly younger. And Spurs also have more international players than United do have. So the more tangible stats that do not go back to history and head-to-heads actually is a little bit more in favor of Spurs. Now let's talk about the final itself in Bilbao. This one is really hard for me to call overall, and we'll see what my model says in just a little bit later. But for me, Spurs should be the better team. We see they have higher value. They have beaten United 3 times already this season, and I have a more identifiable style of play, even though it really doesn't work in the league. But they had a completely different phase in the Europa League. Same goes for United. And while I value Spurs got a little bit more, United have the one difference maker that I think Spurs do not have, especially since Son doesn't have a good season. But Bruno Fernandes can make the difference. And then I just cannot help but look at Harry Maguire popping up in the 90th minute and heading it in for United to win it. So really tough to call. My gut feeling is that United also, thanks in part to their history and because they have been recently winning finals, whereas for Spurs, it would be their first title in ages. I mean, I don't even count the League Cup title. So it is easier for United to win that one. There's a whole lot more expectation on Spurs. Of course, both teams need this win to go into the Champions League. The jersey matchup, I think, should be relatively simple. I expect Spurs in all white and United in a red kit, potentially with black shorts, although I could see, because of Spurs being in all white, that United go to their away kit in all blue. I still think they should play in red with black pants, but that's my best guess at the moment. I'm shooting this on the Sunday before the final. I think it's a classic matchup. It would be easy, of course, if Spurs would play the traditional kit, but in Europe, they always play with white shorts. And so I already gave you my inkling that United probably will win this one. My model, it says 50-50, but if you look a little bit closer, it's again United that are favored by just a hair, 50.05%, as compared to Spurs, 49.95. It is very level overall. I also saw that the bookmakers favor United just about a little bit. So those are my thoughts on this final. Who do you think will win the Europa League and will play in the Champions League next season? I really cannot believe it. I'm so down on this final, even though I'm trying to talk it up, and I will of course watch it. I'm so down on this final that for this preview, I wanted to choose Heung-min Son and Bruno Fernandes whining or crying. I couldn't find a picture, so they have semi-celebratory gestures on the thumbnail. But this was where my head is at for this final. I hope it will be a great one. I don't think it will be a great one, but let's see. In any case, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Drop a comment below on your thoughts ahead of this final, and I will talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye! Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you may enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!